Her mom's just another mouth to feed now that she's retired. That's what I heard casually dropped between sips of orange juice and a Bluetooth call that wasn't nearly as private as Scott thought it was. Amber laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not even a polite one. The kind of laugh that agrees. I stood by the stove holding a tray of blueberry muffins still warm from the oven, my hands steady but my chest doing a slow collapse. The air smelled of butter lemon zest, and something else shame maybe. Scott leaned against the kitchen counter, his tie, half-done phone clipped to his ear. Yeah, man, she's still here. Guess retirement means full-time freeloading. He grinned like he'd just delivered a punchline. Amber reached for her travel mug, brushed his arm, and said, "Stop it, she can hear you." But she was smiling, too. He winked. So what? She raised a tough one right. That was the moment my muffin tray hit the counter, harder than it needed to. The sound made them both flinch. "Oh, Mom," Amber said quickly. "You know he's kidding." "Of course," I said, voice smooth as the frosting I used to make for her birthday cakes. "I love a good joke first thing in the morning." I smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, the one you wear when you're waiting for a bus that's not coming. They went back to their conversation like nothing had happened. The kitchen filled with the familiar click of coffee cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the gentle thud of my dignity hitting the floor. Amber turned toward me. "You know, Mom, you really should do something with all your free time now. Maybe work part-time, volunteer. It's not healthy to just stop." I wiped my hands on a towel, staring at the swirl of butter melting across the counter. "Guess breathing's not considered productive anymore," I said quietly. Scott chuckled, half amused, half dismissive. "Hey, she's got jokes." Amber gave me a look, the kind people give when they think they're helping you see reason, but really they're just shining a flashlight in your eyes. "We just don't want you to get bored, that's all." "Bored," I repeated. That's one word for it. Outside, the rain began to fall soft at first, then harder, tapping against the window like someone trying to warn me. You want to know who I am? Fine. My name's Evelyn Carter, 65, postal audit officer retired, spent 39 years chasing missing decimal points and misplaced decimal souls. I know what people think when they hear retired civil servant. They think dull routine beige. But let me tell you, when you spend your life finding other people's mistakes, you learn to see everything. Every little shift in tone, every missing scent, every smile that hides a ledger of resentment. After my husband died 2 years ago, I thought I'd earned the right to stop counting, to just breathe, bake, and be left alone. But apparently, rest is only noble when you're dead. Amber and Scott moved into this Denver suburb 3 years ago. Beige walls, perfect lawns, neighbors who wave like it's mandatory. They said, "Stay with us for a while, Mom, until you find what's next." I didn't realize a while came with an expiration date. That morning, the kitchen smelled too clean new detergent store-bought coffee, not a trace of the life we used to have. I took one muffin and placed it on a plate for Scott. "Extra blueberries," I said. He looked up briefly from his phone. "Thanks, Evelyn. You didn't have to." Apparently I did. Amber sighed. "Mom?" No, I waved her off. "I'm just doing my part. You know, feeding the extra mouth." The words slipped out before I could stop them. The silence that followed was the kind you could measure with a ruler. Scott cleared his throat, looked at Amber, then at me. It was just a joke. I smiled again, the professional kind, the one I used for difficult supervisors and IRS agents. So was mine. The rain outside grew heavier, tracing long streaks down the window. The sound of it filled the space between us like static. Scott finally grabbed his keys. "Well, I'm late." Again. Amber kissed him quickly on the cheek. "Drive safe." When the door shut, the silence was almost polite. Amber poured herself another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "You know he doesn't mean it right." "Of course he doesn't," I said. "Men like that never mean anything they say, until they do." She frowned. "You always take things too seriously." "Old habit," I said. "We accountants are cursed with memory." Amber glanced toward the window, then back at me. "Mom, maybe it's time you think about selling the old house. Property taxes are ridiculous now. You could use that money to travel or move somewhere smaller. You don't need all that space anymore." Her voice was casual, but her eyes were calculating. I knew that look. The same one she used when she talked to clients about listings and commissions. "Smaller," I repeated. "You mean cheaper?" She shrugged. "Just practical." That's when Scott's voice came again from the entryway. He'd come back for his umbrella, still on his Bluetooth call. "Yeah, maybe she should sell that place before the taxes eat it alive," he said, laughing as he grabbed the umbrella stand. "Can't live off nostalgia forever." Amber didn't even correct him this time. I stood still, hand on the counter, heartbeat syncing with the rain outside. Every drop hit like a clock tick. Time to move on. Time to move out. He stepped back into the rain and disappeared down the driveway. The faucet kept running. I didn't realize I'd turned it on. Water streamed over my hands, hot enough to sting. "Running water, swallowing pride," Mom Amber said softly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just washing up." My voice came out calm, almost cheerful. The kind of tone that makes people believe you're fine because they need you to be. I looked around the kitchen, the glossy cabinets, the granite counters, the digital fridge that talked more than my daughter did. Somewhere between these walls and their smart appliances, I had turned into background noise. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands slowly so they wouldn't shake, and reached for my coat. Amber blinked. "Where are you going? For a walk?" I said. In this rain, I smiled faintly. "It's just water, sweetheart. Some of us still need to learn how to stand in it." By the time I stepped outside, the drizzle had thickened into steady rain. It hit my coat like static applause. Behind me, their house glowed warm through the window, two silhouettes moving comfortably inside a life I no longer fit. The sidewalk glistened with puddles, reflections bending like numbers on wet paper. I pulled my hood tighter, whispering to no one in particular, "Extra mouth." Then quieter. Let's see who eats last. A passing car splashed water onto my shoes. I laughed a dry sound that surprised even me. For 39 years, I balanced other people's books. Maybe it was time I audited my own life. Some debts don't get settled in cash. Some require rain silence and a perfectly timed exit. And mine had just begun. By the time the rain stopped, I'd already made up my mind. There wasn't going to be a fight, a tearful speech, or any kind of cinematic goodbye. People like me don't leave in flames, we leave in silence. And sometimes silence is louder than any door slam. The house was dark except for the blue light from the refrigerator. Amber and Scott were upstairs laughing softly about something on TV. I stood in the kitchen again, the same place where I'd been humiliated 12 hours earlier. The smell of muffins lingered like a ghost, refusing to leave. I pulled out a small overnight bag from the hallway closet, the same one I used years ago when my husband was sick, and I slept at the hospital for weeks. Old habit, pack light, move quiet. In the kitchen, I lined up the remaining muffins. 12 had come out of the oven that morning. 10 were left. I placed 5 into a paper bag for myself and left the other 5 on the counter. The 6th muffin sat alone in the tray, cracked down the middle, like it couldn't decide which side to belong to. I smiled at that. "Story of my life," I whispered. I tore a piece of sticky note from the fridge pad, wrote with my neat auditor's handwriting, "Feed the extra mouth." I stuck it on the counter beside the muffins, a quiet rebellion baked with sugar and sarcasm. Before stepping out, I looked around the kitchen one last time, spotless, soulless, expensive. Amber had decorated it like the inside of a magazine ad, perfect tiles, perfect lighting, perfect distance between chairs, so no one would ever bump into each other. I had scrubbed those counters, not because anyone asked, but because I couldn't stand to see fingerprints. Funny thing, I never noticed the fingerprints that mattered, the ones they left on my patients. I grabbed my coat, slid the key under a flower pot, and closed the door gently. Click. There it was, that small, clean sound. Not the sound of leaving, the sound of reclaiming. It would echo through the story of my life from that moment on. The motel was 3 miles away near the old interstate, the kind of place you only notice when you've run out of options or pride. A buzzing neon sign read, "The Halfway Inn." No irony lost on me. Inside, the carpet smelled faintly of cigarettes and cleaning spray. A woman with pink rollers and leopard print slippers was behind the counter pouring boxed wine into a plastic cup. "You checking in or checking out of life?" she asked, squinting at me with one eye half open. "Maybe both," I said. She laughed a raspy, contagious laugh. "Then welcome to the halfway inn for broken hearts and bad knees." That was my introduction to Clara Gomez, the motel's unofficial therapist, bartender, and comedian in residence. She slid me a key with chipped red polish. "Room 5. View of the parking lot if you squint." "Perfect," I said. "Hot water works if you threaten it," she added. "And don't open the mini fridge unless you want to meet God." I couldn't help it. I laughed. The first real laugh since that morning. It came out sharp surprise like a sneeze you didn't know you needed. Clara grinned. "Ah, see? Still got a pulse. That's the entry fee around here." Room 5 was small but clean, in a way only motels can be everything wiped, but still weary. A single bed, one chair, one cracked mirror above the dresser. I looked at myself in that mirror. Half my face was visible, the other half fractured by the crack running diagonally across the glass. "Half dignity left," I said aloud. The mirror didn't disagree. I placed my bag on the chair, lined up the muffins on the nightstand like trophies from a lost war, and sat down on the bed. The springs protested. Apparently even furniture could judge. For the first time in a long while, I didn't have to lower my voice. I didn't have to pretend I was okay. There was no daughter to comfort, no son-in-law to appease. Just me, a lamp, and 5 muffins with nowhere to go. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Not the kind that startles you, the kind that assumes you're lonely. "Room service," Clara's voice called. I opened the door to find her holding 2 paper cups of boxed wine. "Vintage this morning," she said, handing me one. "I don't usually drink," I said. "That's why I brought 2, she replied. "One for practice." She sat on the edge of the bed, crossed her legs, and looked around. "Nice room. Smells like air freshener and regret." I chuckled. "It's temporary. They all say that," she said. "But you know what's funny about temporary? It lasts longer when you mean it." I sipped the wine. It tasted like grape juice that had seen too much of life. "So she said you running from someone or towards something," both I said after a pause. "I just left my daughter's house." Clara's eyebrows shot up. "Ooh, domestic drama, my favorite genre." "She called me lazy for retiring," I said. "Her husband called me an extra mouth." Clara whistled. "And you left I baked muffins first," I said. She stared, then burst out laughing so loud the ceiling fan wobbled. "God, I love you already." When the laughter faded, she asked softly, "You okay, sweetheart?" I thought about lying, about saying yes, but honesty felt lighter. Not really, but I will be. She nodded, satisfied. "That's the spirit. Around here we heal with sarcasm and bad wine. I've been using silence and spreadsheets," I said. "Same difference," she said. "Both dry, both effective." We sat there, 2 strangers in a half-lit room sharing cheap wine and better truths. Outside, the rain returned, tapping softly against the window. I didn't flinch this time. Later that night, when Clara left, I sat on the bed again, staring at the mirror. My reflection still split down the middle, one side tired, one side amused. "You left without a fight," I whispered to that broken version of myself. "That's not weakness. That's strategy." The mirror flickered with the passing headlights from the parking lot, slicing light across my face. For a moment it looked whole again. I leaned closer and smiled. Not the polite kind. The quiet, private kind, the one that knows something's changing. On the nightstand, the muffins waited. I picked one up, broke it in half, and saved the rest for morning. 2 muffins, I murmured. One for leaving, one for whatever comes next. Then I turned off the lamp. In the darkness, the world outside buzzed with truck engines and motel hum, and underneath it all, faint but steady, the sound of that door closing earlier. Click. A sound that no one else heard, but I would keep hearing for the rest of my life. The next morning smelled like instant coffee and motel soap, a mix of survival and denial. I woke up before sunrise because old habits don't retire even when you do. For 39 years, I started my day with balance sheets, not breakfast. Now I started it with a question that refused to balance. How did my own life end up in red ink? The motel was quiet except for the hum of vending machines and the occasional door slam from travelers who looked like they'd been running from the same ghosts I was. On the nightstand sat my overnight bag, and beneath it a small metal cash box I hadn't opened in years. It was the last thing my husband left behind, buried under tax files and old utility bills in the garage. I'd tossed it into my car before leaving Amber's house, almost without thinking. Maybe instinct isn't just survival. Maybe it's accounting for the soul. I sat on the bed, the metal box cold against my knees. The lock was old and stiff, the kind of thing you open once and never close again. With a quiet snap, it gave way. Inside were the fragments of a life I'd already filed away. Our marriage certificate edges yellowed. My husband's death certificate creased but dry. A photo of him smiling with a wrench in hand, his laugh frozen midair. And at the very bottom, an envelope sealed with an office stamp. From the desk of Daniel Ross, Senior Audit Supervisor. The handwriting was neat, almost mechanical. Daniel never allowed ink to bleed outside the lines. I hadn't thought about him in years. We worked together at the Postal Audit Office for nearly 2 decades. He was the one who taught me how to chase anomalies, not people, because numbers he said once never lie. People do. The letter felt heavier than paper should. I hesitated. When your life has already fallen apart once you learn not to rush anything that might break it again. I slid it open with a butter knife from the motel kitchenette. Inside one page, typed neatly on letterhead Evelyn, in reviewing old accounts, I discovered a deferred compensation balance from your 1987 pension audit. It appears the payout was never processed due to administrative error. The amount with interest is substantial. I've held off closing the file assuming you'd want discretion. If this reaches you, call me directly. Daniel Ross. At the bottom was a phone number landline old school. I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't race, but something else stirred a quiet, cold awareness, the same feeling you get when you realize the numbers don't add up and maybe they never were supposed to. A deferred fund, an administrative error. Those phrases were like catnip for people like me. I picked up my phone. The motel clock read 8:13 a.m. He answered on the third ring. Ross. Daniel, I said softly. There was a pause, the kind you can measure in years. Then calmly, still balancing everyone's books but your own Evelyn. That voice, same steady timbre, the confidence of a man who knew both spreadsheets and people too well. I smiled despite myself. I guess I ran out of ledgers to fix. He chuckled. That's a first. I never thought I'd see the day you'd let the math slide. Guess I'm human after all. Barely, he said, the old teasing tone still there. Then lower. You got my letter. I did. And you didn't call right away. That tells me you're still careful. Or suspicious, I said. Same thing, he replied. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Same cafe we used for the rural audits. It's still standing, unlike half our colleagues. I hesitated. You think this is real, I think. If anyone could lose a small fortune in plain sight, it'd be the Federal Pension Board. And if anyone deserves to find it, it's you. The line went quiet except for the faint static hum like an old radio between frequencies. Then he said softly, Evelyn, just bring yourself. And maybe your instincts. He hung up before I could answer. For a long while, I just sat there staring at the phone. The room felt smaller, like the air had thickened with possibility. I wasn't sure what I felt, hope, fear, or maybe that strange in-between feeling that always comes right before a life changes shape. Outside the motel parking lot glowed under the harsh morning sun. A man in a baseball cap cleaned his windshield with the same energy I used to fix balance sheets, methodical, detached, and slightly angry. I thought of my husband. He used to say, you and your numbers will outlive us all. Maybe he was right. Maybe they were trying to find me now. I tucked the letter into my purse, closed the metal box, and placed it back under the bed. The box thudded softly against the carpet, a sound too small to carry, but I felt it in my chest anyway. That night, the motel was quieter than usual. Even the ice machine seemed to be asleep. I lay awake, the faint hum of the fluorescent light outside flickering through the curtains. Clara's door was 2 rooms down. I could hear her TV some late-night comedy rerun about a family pretending to like each other. I almost laughed at the irony. Just as I began to drift off, I heard a soft metallic rattle. Not loud, just enough. The sound of a doorknob turning. My body went cold before my mind could catch up. Another rattle, slower this time, testing the latch. My eyes darted to the nightstand. I reached for the flashlight I'd kept beside me. Heavy metal solid. Years of auditing government property had taught me never trust locks. Always have light. I stood quietly barefoot on the cheap carpet and aimed the flashlight at the door. The knob twitched once more. Then silence. I waited 10 seconds, 20. Nothing. Outside, a car door slammed, followed by tires crunching over gravel. The sound faded into the night. I stayed frozen, listening to my own breath until it sounded foreign. Then I whispered, half to the room, half to the universe, "You're not stealing from me again." My voice was steady. My hand not so much. Eventually, I sat back on the bed, flashlight still in hand. The letter peeked out from my purse, the corner catching the lamplight. For years, I'd worked to protect other people's money, other people's truth. Maybe that's why mine had gone missing. No one had been left to protect it. Somewhere between exhaustion and adrenaline, a single thought took root. If this fund was real, if Daniel was right, then my story wasn't over. Maybe for the first time, it was just beginning. I turned off the flashlight, pulled the thin blanket over me, and listened to the hum of the neon sign outside. It buzzed like a heartbeat, steady, relentless, alive. And beneath it, the faint echo of that same sound that started it all, click. A lock turning somewhere, somehow in my favor. The cafe hadn't changed in 20 years. Same beige booths, same chipped mugs, same smell of burnt espresso and lemon disinfectant. The only thing different was me. I slid into the corner booth, back to the wall-old auditor habit. Always face the door, always note the exits. 10:02, sharp Daniel Ross walked in wearing the same brown corduroy blazer he'd probably owned since the Carter administration. The man aged like an old ledger, frayed at the corners, still precise in the middle. "Evelyn Hart," he said, smiling like he'd just discovered an unclaimed asset. "Daniel Ross," I replied, trying to match his calm. He set a leather briefcase on the table, ordered black coffee, and looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You look the same," he said, "except maybe your eyes got smarter." "I retired," I said. "Now I use them for reading expiration dates." He chuckled low and warm, still sharp then. The waitress poured coffee into our cups, the liquid dark as memory. So I said, nodding toward the briefcase, "You didn't drag me here just for caffeine." Daniel's lips twitched. "Actually, I did. Caffeine and closure." He opened the case. Inside was a stack of documents, neatly labeled folders, the kind only someone who truly fears chaos would keep after retirement. I didn't believe it at first, he said, flipping through the papers. I was doing a review of unclaimed pension adjustments, ancient files most long forgotten. Then your name popped up. Hart EM, deferred compensation pending verification. I almost spilled my coffee. He slid one sheet across the table. "Here, recognize that signature?" I looked down, my own name written in the careful handwriting I used before carpal tunnel and life softened the edges. The date, June 12th, 1998. I blinked. "I don't even remember signing this." "You didn't," he said gently. "Someone else did." The payout file got caught in the transfer backlog when the retirement division merged. "You were owed money, Evelyn, a lot of it, and no one ever told you." He turned another page, revealing a printout, the kind from an old calculator machine numbers, scrolling endlessly down a strip of thermal paper. The sound it made back then still echoed in my memory. Click, roll, click. "Total deferred compensation with accrued interest," he said, tapping the bottom line with a pen. $412 sooner, 47. I stared. Not at the number, but at the absurdity of it. $412,000, enough to buy back my pride twice and still leave tip money for karma. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hiss of the espresso machine and the blood rushing in my ears. Finally, I whispered, "You're serious?" Daniel nodded. "Dead serious. You earned every penny." My throat tightened. "I was too busy raising Amber back then," I murmured. "I must have ignored the paperwork." Daniel smiled, not unkindly. "Then maybe it's time the numbers pay you back." He leaned back, watching my reaction with that same old precision he used to reserve for audit interviews. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, like I was inhaling all the years I'd spent being practical, patient, invisible. The folder sat between us, glowing under the fluorescent light like some sacred relic. "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered. "Start with, 'Thank you,'" he said with a grin. "Then maybe, 'Where's the check?'" I laughed, a short, startled sound that cracked through the tension. Still the same Daniel. "You'd turn grief into a ledger entry if you could." He shrugged. "Someone has to make sense of it." "Sense," I echoed softly. "That's what I've been missing." He tilted his head. "You mean balance?" I met his eyes. "Both." The waitress came by again, refilling our mugs. The smell of coffee filled the silence, rich, grounding, familiar. I watched the steam curl upward like the ghost of all those mornings I spent at my desk, working through columns of numbers for people who would never remember my name. Now, for the first time, the numbers were whispering back. I reached for the calculator tape, running my finger along its edge. It felt like history, thin, fragile, but still speaking. "You kept all this," I said quietly. "All these years." Daniel's expression softened. "I kept the file because you were the only one who ever refused to sign something you didn't read. You were the reason half the audits in our region stayed honest." He leaned closer. "I also kept it because I knew one day you'd need a reminder that your work mattered." For a second, I didn't know whether to smile or cry. I did both, a shaky laugh with a tear that refused to fall. "I thought I'd built my life around doing things right," I said. "Turns out I forgot to include myself in the equation. That's the curse of the good ones," Daniel said. "You spend so long balancing the world, you forget to count your own hours." He handed me an envelope, this one new crisp, printed with a bank seal. "The claim is processed. It'll clear in 3 business days." I stared at it. $412,000. I said it out loud, trying to make it sound real. "That's more than I made in 10 years. Daniel smirked. "Then maybe you were underpaid." For the first time since David's funeral, I felt something like power stirring beneath the grief. Not arrogance, no, this was quieter. The kind that comes from knowing you've finally been seen. I sipped my coffee and exhaled. Guess I'm officially a profitable extra mouth. Daniel laughed so loud the waitress jumped. "Oh, that's one for the books. I might embroider that on a pillow." "Or a tax form," I said, smiling. He shook his head, still laughing. "You haven't changed at all." "Maybe not," I said softly, glancing at the rolling tape still unspooling across the table. But the math finally did. When the laughter faded, silence filled the booth again, not awkward, but weighted. Daniel looked at me thoughtfully. "What will you do with it?" "Not sure yet," I said. "Maybe something practical. Maybe something stupid." "Both," he suggested. "That's balance." I smiled. Spoken like a retired philosopher disguised as an auditor. "Guilty," he said, raising his cup, "to the numbers that kept you honest." I lifted mine, "and to the people who finally let them speak." Our cups clinked softly. Later, as I walked back to the bus stop, I carried the envelope under my arm like a fragile artifact. The sky over Denver had turned gray again, that same kind of steady, judgmental drizzle that makes you remember who you are. Cars passed. People hurried. Life went on. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a background character in my own story. I felt recalculated. When I got back to the motel, the neon sign was flickering again. I set the envelope on the table beside my old calculator, the one I'd kept since my first job. I turned it on, pressed the keys slowly. Each click echoed like a heartbeat. Then the paper roll began to feed itself line after line, printing in perfect rhythm. Click, roll, click. The numbers weren't silent anymore. They were testifying. The smell of cheap motel coffee and lavender air freshener had become my new normal. Clara was sprawled across my bed in a pink bathrobe hair and curlers scrolling Zillow like it was scripture. She claimed house hunting was her version of meditation, except with schadenfreude and better lighting. "Look at this one," she said, stabbing at the screen. "Marble countertops, ugly chandelier probably smells like betrayal, and Glade plugins." I smiled, half listening, half lost in the hum of the old heater. The envelope with the $412,000 still sat on my nightstand. I hadn't touched it yet, not even to peek. It wasn't about the money. It was about proof. Clara gasped suddenly. "Oh my God, honey, come look at this." I turned my head lazily. If it's another McMansion with gray vinyl siding, I'm filing a complaint. She shoved the phone into my hands. "No, this one's familiar." I squinted at the screen. 46B Willow Creek Drive, Denver suburbs. Listing status pre-foreclosure. Reason delinquent property taxes. My pulse hiccuped. That's Amber's address. Clara grinned like a cat spotting an open bird cage. "Well, sugar looks like karma's not just real, she's having a clearance sale." At first I laughed one of those dry, disbelieving laughs that get stuck halfway up your throat. "There's no way," I said. "Scott's an investment consultant. He'd rather sell a kidney than miss a payment." Clara sipped her boxed wine like a prophet. Maybe the tax fairy came for her cut. I took the phone back, reading every word twice. Pre-foreclosure notice issued. Auction scheduled in 72 hours. I scrolled through the photos, the kitchen I once scrubbed, spotless the deck I'd sanded one summer while Amber vacationed in Aspen. It didn't feel like comedy. It felt like math again, the universe balancing its books in public view. I called Daniel. He picked up on the first ring. "Ross, it's me." I assumed so. "You sound like you've just discovered a rounding error in heaven." "Close," I said. "Amber's house is listed for pre-foreclosure." Silence. Then address. 46B Willow Creek Drive. He paused, muttered something I couldn't catch. Then the sound of typing followed. I imagined him at his desk still working like the world depended on it. After a few seconds, he whistled low. "You're right. Tax liens filed 3 months ago. Cities moving fast auctions in 72 hours. Can they really lose it that quickly? If they ignored the notices, yes. And judging by the paperwork they did." Clara, eavesdropping, shamelessly whispered. She was too busy buying matching sweaters for her golden retrievers. Daniel sighed through the receiver. "Evelyn, before you say what I think you're about to say, this isn't revenge, it's acquisition. If you do it clean." I looked at the phone, then at the window. Outside, the motel's neon light flickered like a heartbeat, one that refused to die. "Clean," I repeated softly. "Always." That night, I spread out Daniel's papers on the little table near the window. Pension forms, tax maps, bank details. For the first time since retiring, I felt awake. The skill set I'd buried under years of domestic compromise came rushing back like muscle memory. I checked the parcel record, verified the lien amount, calculated the penalty interest. My fingers moved fast, confident the old Evelyn resurrected through spreadsheets. Clara leaned on the doorframe, swirling her wine. "You look like you're plotting a jewel heist." "In a way I am," I said, "but the jewels are unpaid taxes." She grinned. "Sexy." At 10:47 p.m., I opened my laptop and navigated to the state registry. To bid on a foreclosure property, I needed an entity. Individuals get questioned. Corporations get respect. I clicked Create New LLC. Name field EC Holdings. Clara peered over my shoulder. EC. That's mysterious. "Evelyn Clara," I said. "Consider yourself promoted to Vice President of Moral Justice." She squealed, raising her plastic cup. "To the empire of middle-aged vengeance," I corrected, gently smiling. "To asset recovery." As I filled in the forms, I thought of Amber, of the night I left her laughter echoing from upstairs while I washed dishes in silence, of her words, "You can't just loaf around, Mom." I remembered the way she said retire like it was a disease, and yet here I was, not loafing but calculating, structuring, planning. The irony tasted sweet. I uploaded the necessary documents, entered the EIN Daniel had helped me obtain that morning, and double-checked the legal address. Clara hovered, whispering, "I feel like I should be wearing a spy wig. Just don't spill your drink on the keyboard," I muttered. I reached the final page, Submit Registration. A blue button blinked back at me. For a moment, I just stared. All my life, I'd filed forms for others, corporations, agencies, departments. Always the supporting name, never the signature that mattered. Now the form bore only mine. Steam rose from my cup of chamomile tea, swirling upward, soft, quiet, unstoppable. It filled the air between me and the screen like a living thing. Clara broke the silence. "You gonna click it or need a priest?" I smiled. No priest necessary. And then, with a calm that came from years of swallowing pride, I pressed the mouse. Click. The sound was sharp, echoing through the small motel room like a gavel. The same sound that had followed me from Amber's door to this one, the sound of endings becoming beginnings. "Done," I said. Clara blinked. "So what now, boss lady?" "Now," I said, closing the laptop, "we wait 72 hours. She raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For justice," I said, taking a slow sip of tea. "And maybe a new mailing address." Steam rose again from the cup, a thin silver wisp that caught the neon glow from outside. It looked almost like smoke from a fuse. 3 days, 72 hours. That's all that stood between my daughter's arrogance and my quiet correction of the record. I wasn't stealing her home. I was reclaiming my balance sheet in property form. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere distant, soft and heavy. I glanced at the laptop again. The confirmation email blinked in. EC Holdings, LLC registered successfully. I let the words settle in my mind like fresh ink drying on old paper. Clara clapped her hands. "I can't believe it. You're actually doing it." I smiled, calm and certain. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just letting the paperwork speak." The rain began tapping against the window. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the laptop's faint glow illuminating the steam rising from my cup. The air shimmered with warmth, silence, and power, the kind that doesn't shout, doesn't gloat, but simply waits. And in that quiet, the sound came again, louder this time, more deliberate, almost triumphant. Click. Somewhere a door was closing, and another was opening. The county courthouse was smaller than I remembered, the kind of building that smelled like old paper cold coffee and 1,000 quiet tragedies. A sign outside read Tax Lien, Auction Public Access. Inside, a handful of people milled around, folding chairs and plastic tables, some in work boots, some in suits, all with that same hungry look of people chasing opportunity disguised as loss. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for balance. I took a seat near the back, opened my tablet, and connected to the county's live bidding portal. Each bidder was represented by a number, anonymity at its finest. "Welcome, participant number 1187. On the screen greeted me. My company, EC Holdings, LLC, had officially entered the ring. Back at the motel, Clara had turned our room into a war room. She'd stacked snacks, energy drinks, and 2 wine boxes like ammunition. Her laptop was propped on a pillow, streaming the live feed from the auction. "All right, boss lady," she said through FaceTime. "I've got eyes on the battlefield. You look terrifyingly calm, by the way. I used to audit people who hid millions in offshore accounts," I said, adjusting my glasses. "This is arithmetic with better lighting." Clara snorted. "If math had a mafia, you'd run it." The clerk stepped up to the podium microphone, crackling. "Lot number 26, he announced. Property address 46B Willow Creek Drive. Starting bid $125,000. My fingers brushed against the chain of my husband's old pocket watch, the one I'd started carrying again. The soft ticking filled my ear like a heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. "Opening at 125, the clerk repeated. "Do I have 140? A voice across the room shouted 140. Another instantly followed. 160. The rhythm began, voices overlapping, numbers ricocheting. It was chaos, but a kind of chaos I understood. Every raise, every shout, every click of the digital counter was a beat in an invisible waltz. Clara's voice came through my earpiece. "You're still the lowest bidder. Want me to hit it?" "No," I said. "Let them climb first. Tick, tick, tick." The bids rose fast. $175,000, $200,000, $245,000. The clerk's voice never wavered, the human metronome of capitalism. "Do I have 260, 260, yes. 270, 275, thank you, bidder, 3 and a 12. I waited. In auditing, timing was everything, not just what you said, but when you said it. Numbers had rhythm, and I'd learned to dance with them decades ago. 300,000, someone yelled. The room buzzed. I could almost smell adrenaline in the air, metallic and sharp. Clara whispered, "Still no sign of your daughter's crew. Maybe they bailed." That's when the screen blinked. New bidder entered 4458, and then his face appeared in the auction's corner feed. Scott. I froze, a thin smile forming as if carved by instinct. He wasn't in the room. He was remote logged in via proxy somewhere else in Denver. Of course he'd show up. Pride was the only currency he couldn't let go of. I whispered into the mic, "Let's dance, son-in-law." Clara nearly spilled her wine. "Is that him? Oh, this is better than cable." Scott's bids came fast and loud, every increment a punch to the air. 320, 330, 340. I countered with calm, calculated taps. Bid placed $345,000. My watch ticked faster. Tick, tick, tick. Across the digital board, the gap tightened. 355, 360. The clerk's monotone voice called out each number like a countdown to fate. Daniel texted mid-chaos, "Stay disciplined. Never chase emotion, let numbers chase you." I smiled faintly, fingers hovering over the bid button. Emotion was a liability. Calculation was legacy. Scott raised again. $370,000. The crowd murmured. Even through the live stream, I could hear Clara's breath hitch. "Your move, Queen of Audits," she whispered. I stared at the screen, at the house that once held my laughter, my exhaustion, my humiliation, at the man who once joked about me being an extra mouth. My thumb pressed down. Bid placed $378,000. Silence. For a second, the entire courthouse felt like it inhaled and forgot to exhale. The clerk looked up. "Do I have 380? I pause. No movement. Somewhere on the digital feed, Scott's face tightened, that arrogant smirk replaced by disbelief. He mouthed something I couldn't hear. Probably impossible. The clerk raised his gavel. Going once, tick. Going twice, tick. Sold to bidder, 1187. Tick. And just like that, the math was mine. The tablet flashed in bold white letters, "You won!" Clara's scream nearly blew out my earpiece. Retirement goals. Baby laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep, the kind of laughter that comes when justice finally remembers your address. The entire courthouse turned to look at me, unsure why the quiet woman in the corner was smiling like she'd just solved God's spreadsheet. I stood gathering my things calmly, like I'd merely checked off a grocery list item. The clerk approached, clipboard in hand. "Congratulations, ma'am. EC Holdings correct." "That's right," I said. He extended the papers. "Proof of payment due within 24 hours. It's already wired," I said. "Check your ledger." He blinked, checked, and nodded slowly. "Efficient." "I'm retired," I said. "That's all I have time for." Outside, the cold air hit my face like punctuation. Snowflakes began to drift lazy and sparse, settling on the courthouse steps. I could almost hear my husband's voice teasing, "You always did know how to balance things." Back at the motel, Clara was dancing barefoot, bathrobe, flying, holding her wine like a victory trophy. "Evelyn, you magnificent spreadsheet sorceress," she yelled through the screen. "You just outbid the devil with his own wallet." I couldn't stop laughing. It wasn't wild or vengeful, it was clean, crystalline earned. When the laughter finally quieted, I sat on the motel bed, the watch ticking softly in my hand. The same rhythm that started it all. Tick, tick, tick. Clara collapsed next to the camera, breathless. What's next? Paperwork, I said, smiling. Always paperwork. Boring answer. Effective one, I corrected. The auction confirmation email blinked onto my tablet. Congratulations, EC Holdings LLC has won lot. 2646B Willow Creek Drive. I took a sip of tea, the steam curling upward in delicate spirals, quiet power in motion. Then I whispered to no one in particular, balance restored. In the background, the motel heater rattled like distant applause. Somewhere a clock ticked, and through the static of the live stream, Clara's voice rose one last time. Retirement goals, baby, I smiled. No, I said softly. That's just good accounting. Tick, tick, tick. 3 days after the auction, the world felt quieter. Maybe it was just me, or maybe it was the sound of a balance sheet finally evening out. The official deed transfer came through faster than expected. EC Holdings LLC now owned 46B Willow Creek Drive, the same address where I'd once folded laundry-baked muffins and been called an extra mouth to feed. Now I was the landlord. They just didn't know it yet. Clara nearly fainted when I told her. You mean to tell me, she said, eyes wide, you bought your daughter's house and didn't even flinch? I didn't buy it, I corrected. I reclaimed it. With interest. She burst out laughing. Evelyn, this is better than any soap opera I've ever seen. You're like the Martha Stewart of vengeance. I raised my teacup. Quiet accounting. Loud karma. To keep things clean, Daniel recommended I hire a property manager under EC Holdings' name. But I wanted to see it myself, the numbers, the repairs, the people. So I hired Sam Delaney, a local contractor recommended by the courthouse clerk. Early 40s worn denim jacket smile that looked permanent. He showed up at the property holding a clipboard and said, You must be Ms. Edwards, the consultant for EC Holdings. That's right, I said smoothly, just checking on some deferred maintenance. He whistled low, glancing at the roofline. Deferred is a nice way to put it. Whoever owned this place didn't believe in gutters insulation or mercy. I smiled thinly. They believed in appearances. Different religion entirely. Sam chuckled. You got that secret agent vibe, ma'am, like you're here to catch spies, not leaks. Only financial ones, I said. We started with the porch. The steps were split boards warped from years of neglect. Every time the hammer hit a sharp crack, echoed through the quiet neighborhood. It was oddly satisfying. Each strike felt like punctuation to a sentence I'd been too polite to finish years ago. The neighbors peeked from behind blinds, whispering to each other. One woman in a floral housecoat called across the yard, You folks with the new management company. Yep, Sam replied. EC Holdings. They're real hands-on. Well, good, she said. That last couple let the place go. Whole street's glad someone's fixing it up. I smiled under my sunglasses, glad to restore value. Later that afternoon, Sam came back from the basement, shaking his head. Pipes leaking like a politician's promises, he said. We'll need to replace about 20 feet of copper. Do it, I said. He blinked. No hesitation. Huh? Water damage compounds, I replied. So does denial. He let out a low whistle. You really are an auditor, huh, retired, I said. But the habits linger. He grinned. Well, you sure don't act retired. Most folks your age buy cruises. You're out here running covert operations. Let's just say, I replied, I prefer clean books and dry basements. By the time we finished patching the porch and replacing the pipes, the house looked alive again, like it had exhaled after holding its breath too long. Clara dropped by that evening with a grocery bag full of muffins. Symbolic delivery, she announced. You're officially haunting your own house. I took one bit into it and laughed. Fitting, isn't it? I'm the ghost landlord. She grinned. The best kind. You collect rent and disappear. 2 days later, the first notice of new lease terms went out, rent adjustment included. Daniel had worded it perfectly, reflecting current market value, which happened to be double the old rate. By Monday, the phone in my motel room rang off the hook. Clara picked up before I could. EC Holdings Moral Accounting Division. How may I help you, Clara? I hissed. She winked. Kidding. It's probably them. Sure enough, Amber's voice cut through the line, sharp, indignant. "This is Amber Carver. I just got a notice saying our rent's been doubled. There must be some mistake." I took a slow sip of tea before answering. "Ma'am, all documentation has been verified by the county records. You'll find the payment details attached in your lease renewal." She bristled. "And who are you, consultant for EC Holdings?" I said evenly. "We oversee transition properties." Amber huffed. "Well, it's ridiculous. We've been good tenants." "I'm sure you have," I said. "The market's just correcting itself." Then I hung up. Clara fell off the bed laughing. "You just gave your daughter a rent increase speech straight out of Monopoly." I allowed myself a small smile. No, out of experience. By evening, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Someone posted on the community app. "Anyone know who bought 46B Rumor says it's a mystery investor from out of state." Another replied, "Whoever it is, they fixed the porch in a day. Must have money." And then someone added, "Heard the new owners doubled rent." Savage. I couldn't help it. I laughed until I cried. Across town in that freshly repaired house, Amber was pacing the kitchen. Scott stood near the counter, jaw tight. "They doubled the rent," she said. "We can't afford that right now, not after your investment." "Don't," he snapped. "Don't start that again. What are we supposed to do, Scott? Move our credits shot after the tax thing." He grabbed his phone, scrolling furiously. "I'll find out who the hell owns this place. No one doubles my rent and gets away with it." Amber crossed her arms. "Maybe if you'd paid the taxes, don't you start?" Their voices rose sharp against the walls I'd once painted myself. From across the street, I could see their silhouettes through the window, arguing in the same kitchen, where I'd once been told to help out more. I sat in my car engine off coffee steaming in a paper cup. The streetlight above me flickered, glinting off the property's new mailbox, one Sam had painted fresh white. I whispered, "Audit complete." The words felt final, not cruel, not gloating, just balanced. Every number, every line, every act of quiet endurance had led here. No revenge, no shouting match, just precision. The same way I'd lived my life, ledger by ledger, moment by moment. Clara texted as I sat there watching the house. "You done, boss," I typed back. "Done, no." Balanced. She replied with a photo of 2 muffins and a wine bottle. Celebration inventory acquired. I smiled. Outside, the wind carried the faint hum of the neighborhood sprinklers, dogs' laughter from other homes. 46B stood still, lights glowing, warm, oblivious to the ghost across the street. I took one last sip of coffee, turned the key, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the porch light flicker. Once, twice, then stay steady. It was almost like the house was saying, "Welcome back." The community center smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety. Folding chairs were lined up in uneven rows, a hand-painted sign taped to the wall, "Tenant Meeting EC Holdings Property Group." I stood near the back, checking the clock on the wall. It ticked slow, each second stretching like elastic. Beside me, Clara adjusted her oversized sunglasses and whispered, "You look terrifying. Like Meryl Streep in a tax audit." "That's the goal," I said, straightening my gray blazer. Across the room, a few tenants had gathered, mostly quiet, curious. Then right on cue, the storm walked in. Amber and Scott. Amber looked tired. The kind of tired that's half worry, half guilt. Scott, meanwhile, strode in like a man born angry at furniture. He was gripping a folder, jaw locked, face red. He spotted the EC Holdings banner and barked, "We're here to speak with the landlord. This rent hike is illegal. I demand answers." The coordinator, a nervous young man with a clipboard, stammered, The landlord's representative will be here shortly." Amber folded her arms. "Representative, oh please, whoever this is better be ready to explain how they think they can double." She stopped mid-sentence, because I stepped forward. "Good evening," I said, voice steady, clear. "Evelyn Carter, the lazy mouth who bought your house." The silence that followed could have paid rent. Amber's mouth fell open. Scott blinked like someone had thrown water in his face. You could hear the coffee machine hum. Even the air conditioning seemed to hesitate. Then Clara, bless her dramatic heart, broke the tension with both hands in the air. "Now that's an entrance," she shouted. A few tenants actually laughed. The rest just stared, waiting to see if this was about to turn into a sermon or a crime scene. Scott found his voice first. You can't be serious. You bought our house." I smiled faintly. "Technically, EC Holdings did. I just happen to own EC Holdings." Amber's eyes filled fast. "Mom, why would you do that? How could you—" "I didn't do it to you," I interrupted softly. "I did it for me." Scott slammed the folder on a chair. "You're out of your mind. You think this is some kind of victory. You humiliated us." I looked at him evenly. "You humiliated yourselves when you stopped paying your taxes." The room gasped quietly. Even Clara lowered her sunglasses, whispering, "Ooh, cold, icy, delicious." Amber's tears spilled. "We were struggling, Mom. You could have helped instead of I did help," I said, not raising my voice. "For years, with groceries, babysitting bills, things you never even noticed. You said I was lazy for wanting to rest, but I wasn't resting, Amber. I was recovering." She froze, tears trembling on her lashes. I continued, calm but sharp as glass. "I didn't buy this house to hurt you. I bought it to stop letting you decide my worth." Clara started clapping again, ignoring the daggers from Scott. "Can someone get her a mic, because that was poetry?" Scott turned on her. "Who are you, public relations?" she said brightly. "And designated wine taster." He groaned. "This is insane." "No," I said. "This is order." He turned back to me. "What do you want? You think owning this place makes you better than us?" I shook my head. "Not better, just free." Amber's voice cracked. "You could have told me. You could have said something before letting us walk into this meeting like idiots." "I didn't owe you that warning," I said. "For years I watched you both measure my value by what I could provide. Meals, money, babysitting. And when I stopped providing, you called me extra." Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you did," I said gently. "And it's all right, because now I finally understand something." I stepped closer, my voice low but unwavering. "You said I was an extra mouth. Turns out I had the appetite for ownership." Clara stood up and slow clapped like we were on Broadway. "Ladies and gentlemen, the accountant has left the chat." The room broke into nervous laughter. Even a few tenants who didn't know us chuckled quietly, shaking their heads in admiration. Scott's face burned crimson. "This isn't over. You can't just come in and—" "Actually, I can," I said, cutting him off smoothly. "I followed every law, every regulation. The paperwork speaks. And unlike gossip, paperwork doesn't lie." He sputtered. You're unbelievable." "Thank you," I said. "I take that as a professional compliment." Amber took a shaky breath, tears still falling. "Mom, please. We don't have anywhere else to go. The kids I know," I said softly. "That's why I haven't served an eviction notice. Yet." She blinked. "Yet you'll stay for now," I said, "but under a proper lease, as tenants, not dependents. If you want stability, you'll earn it the way I had to." Scott opened his mouth to argue, but Amber grabbed his arm. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." He glared but said nothing. The coordinator timidly cleared his throat. "So? Does that mean the meeting's over?" Clara turned to him. "Honey, this meeting ended the second she dropped that mic." Everyone laughed again. Even Amber let out a watery smile she probably didn't mean to. Scott stormed out first, muttering curses under his breath. Amber hesitated, then turned to me. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I said. "Just pay on time." She nodded, biting her lip, and followed him out. When the door closed, the room exhaled. Clara jumped up, twirling in place. Evelyn Carter, corporate overlord, emotional assassin, queen of calm destruction. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the small laugh that escaped. "You're ridiculous." "Ridiculous is underrated," she said, plopping into a chair. "Also that line about appetite chef's kiss. I felt that in my taxes." I shook my head, sipping my tea, because of course I'd brought tea to a confrontation. The steam curled upward, soft and proud. "Do you feel better?" she asked. "Not better," I said. "Balanced." As we packed up, the janitor walked by and said, "Heard you're the new owner of the Willow Creek house." "That's right," I said. He nodded approvingly. "Good. Place needed someone who gives a damn." Clara beamed. "Oh, she gives plenty, trust me." Outside, the evening air felt light. The sun was melting into the horizon, washing the parking lot in gold. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. Not like a burden, not like a mouth to feed, but like someone who'd finally learned how to feed herself. Clara looped her arm through mine as we walked to the car. "So what's next, boss?" I smiled. "Maintenance. Always maintenance." She laughed. "You and your metaphors." I looked back once more at the sign fluttering on the door, EC Holdings Property Group. My name wasn't on it, but my piece was. Rain came early that night, drumming steady against the motel windows. I just finished balancing the month's ledger for EC Holdings Poetic, I know, when my phone buzzed. A text from Sam. "Sam, boss, you're going to want to check the security feed." Channel 3. I frowned, pushed my tea aside, and opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life grainy grayscale footage from the property management office across town. And there he was, Scott Carver. Soaked jacket, hood-up flashlight clutched in one hand like a weapon. He slipped inside the office through a side window, moving with the desperation of a man who thought no one was watching. But I was. He rifled through the filing cabinets, tossing folders onto the floor. Lease agreements, tax receipts, ownership transfer papers, all scattering like confetti at a very sad parade. The camera caught every movement, every muttered curse. Sam's voice came through the line, whispering from his truck outside. "He's digging for your name, Miss Carter. He's losing it." I watched quietly. Let him. People like that always think truth hides on paper when it's written all over their actions. Sam snorted softly. "You're colder than this rain, you know that occupational habit," I replied. "Auditors don't chase emotion. We record it." Scott yanked open the last drawer and froze. There the file stamped in bold black EC Holdings, LLC owner records. His breathing quickened. He stuffed the folder into his backpack and turned toward the door. But before he could leave, he noticed the blinking red light above the fuse box the new system Sam had installed. Scott sneered. "Not that easy," he muttered, reaching for the cover plate. "Don't," Sam's voice crackled through the phone too late. The moment Scott's screwdriver met the circuit, a flash of white light burst from the box. Crack. He flew backward, hitting the wall hard. The camera jolted static, blooming across the screen before refocusing. Scott lay sprawled on the tile, clutching his arm, dazed but conscious. Rain poured through the open window, slicking the floor in thin reflections of light. "Karma jolt," Sam muttered, watching from the feed. "Didn't even need divine intervention, just bad wiring." "Good thing you grounded it," I said. "Oh, I did more than that." He tripped the emergency alert. "Cops are already on their way." "Then let the audit finish itself," I replied quietly. 15 minutes later, blue and red lights flashed across the street. 2 police cruisers pulled up, rain misting their windshields. Through the camera, I saw them drag Scott to his feet, soaked, trembling, furious. He tried to argue his words, slurring between shock and rage. "It's my house. My name should be on those papers." One officer snapped cuffs around his wrists. "Not your office, not your key." Sam filmed everything, leaning against his truck like a spectator at a play he'd already seen too many times. By the time Daniel arrived, crisp trenchcoat umbrella in hand, the scene was under control. He signed the report calmly, eyes sharp behind his glasses. Breaking and entering, he told the officer. Attempted theft of legal documents. "The footage will make this easy." I joined the call on speaker. "Press charges," Sam said. "He deserves it." But Daniel glanced at the screen where my face appeared faintly in the reflection of the rain-slick window. "You're the one who decides." "Evelyn," he said gently. I took a long breath. "No. Let him go." Sam blinked. "Seriously?" "Yes," I said. "The lesson's already delivered. Paper trails don't lie, and neither do handcuffs." An hour later, Scott stood outside the office, wrists, cuffed, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. The police officer's flashlight cut through the downpour as Daniel stepped forward with his umbrella. "Mr. Carver." Daniel said quietly, "You should know something. Evelyn doesn't need to destroy you. You're doing that yourself." Scott glared, teeth clenched. "You think she's a saint? She ruined us." "No," Daniel said. "She corrected you." Then he turned away, motioning for the officers to take him. The next morning, I sent one text, just one photo snapped from Sam's feed. Scott handcuffed in the rain, his eyes half defiant, half broken. The caption beneath read, "Audit complete." Hours passed before my phone buzzed again. "Amber, Amber. He was arrested, me detained. He'll be fine. Amber." "You could have stopped this. Me so could he." No reply. But that evening, as the sky dimmed and the motel neon flickered outside my window, I saw her car drive by on the CCTV feed trunk, packed wipers clearing streaks of storm water. She parked briefly outside the house. Then through the rain, I watched her place something on the porch, a small folded envelope. When Sam retrieved it later, he handed it to me wordlessly. Inside was a single note written in shaky ink I understand now. "Love should never come with rent attached. Amber." I sat on the edge of the motel bed reading it twice. No anger, no triumph. Just quiet. Outside, the rain softened into a steady rhythm, washing the night clean. Clara knocked once and peeked in, holding 2 mugs of chamomile. "Is it over?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Audits never end, Clara. They just close their books." She set the mugs down and grinned. "Then here's to balance sheets and divine payback." We clinked cups. Later, I went back to the feed one last time. The office was dark, now empty, except for the faint glow of the security light. Outside, a police cruiser idled, rain glittering on its hood before it rolled away. The property stood still, solid, quiet, waiting. I whispered to the screen, "You see Scott. The math always finds you." Then I closed the laptop. By morning, the sun rose clean and gold over Willow Creek. The puddles on the pavement shimmered like small mirrors. For the first time in months, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I didn't need apologies or restitution, only proof that what goes around, quite literally, comes back charged. 6 months later, the world had settled into something softer. No more courtrooms, no late-night security calls, no adrenaline disguised as caffeine. Just quiet mornings, the smell of coffee and sunlight that didn't feel like an interrogation. The Willow Creek house no longer belonged to EC Holdings. It now stood under a new name, the Haven Co-op, a community home for single mothers starting fresh. I sold it for fair value, no profit games, no headlines, just paperwork that finally closed instead of chased. Half the proceeds went straight into a fund I'd started with Daniel's help. The Clara Foundation for Women Starting Over. When I told her, Clara nearly fainted into her box of wine. "Sweetheart, you named a foundation after me," she shrieked. "Do I get a crown, a stipend, a throne?" "You get plaque privileges," I said dryly, "and a lifetime supply of muffins." "Perfect," she said, wiping her eyes. "That's all a woman really needs." We stood in the yard of the house one crisp Saturday morning, sleeves rolled up, planting lavender in the flower beds. Sam knelt beside us, dirt smeared on his hands, hammering a small plaque into the ground. It read, "Owned with Grace." Clara whistled. "That's fancier than my ex-husband's tombstone. Let's keep it that way," I said. The scent of lavender filled the air, clean, calm, forgiving. The house looked transformed. Fresh white paint, repaired porch rails, bright shutters. You'd never guess it had once been the scene of a family unraveling. Sam dusted his hands and stood. "Well, that's that. Project complete. You sure you don't want to keep it, boss?" I smiled. "Some homes are meant to be lived in, Sam, not haunted." He nodded. "You're one hell of a ghost, ma'am. The nice kind, the one that leaves people cookies." Clara laughed. "Oh, she's definitely a cookie ghost." I rolled my eyes. "Keep digging, both of you. The soil's not finished yet." We were halfway through planting the second row when a silver car pulled up at the curb. My hands stilled. Amber stepped out. She looked different. Smaller, somehow, but steadier. Jeans, simple sweater hair tied back. She carried a grocery bag in one arm and something like humility in the other. Clara straightened, leaning on her shovel. Well, look who the plot twist dragged in. I shot her a look. Behave. She winked. I'll just water the air, she said, retreating toward the porch with exaggerated stealth. Amber approached slowly, eyes darting from the lavender to the house to me. Hi, Mom. I took a breath, brushed the dirt from my gloves. Morning. She held up the bag. I brought groceries. I wasn't sure what else to do. That's plenty, I said gently. Come sit. We sat at the small porch table, the same one that used to hold her father's morning coffee and my ledgers. The sun fell warm through the trees, dappling the wood with gold. I poured 2 cups. Coffee. She smiled weakly. Still the same brand. Old habits die caffeinated. Amber took a sip, eyes glistening. You were right, Mom, she said quietly. About what? You were never lazy. I just didn't know what hard looked like. Her voice cracked. You made it look easy, holding everything together. I thought that meant it was easy. I reached across the table, covered her hand with mine. Now you do, I said softly. The moment hung there fragile as spun glass before Clara burst through the screen door, waving a spatula. Save me a muffin, boss lady. The volunteers are eating like construction workers. Amber blinked, startled. Is that? Yes, I sighed. That's Clara. Clara waved dramatically. Co-founder, inspiration, occasional nuisance. Nice to meet you, daughter of destiny. Amber laughed through her tears. She's not what I expected. No one ever is, I said, smiling. Sam joined us on the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. Well, that's the last of the plants, he said. Garden's official. Clara grinned. Then let's make it ceremonial. She raised her muffin like a glass. To second chances, clean audits, and hot coffee. Sam raised his rag. To strong women who pay on time. I lifted my mug. To balance in books and in life. Amber hesitated, then raised her own cup. To moms who never stopped believing we'd figure it out. We clinked. The sound was soft, but it carried farther than thunder. Later, Amber helped me water the lavender. She knelt beside me, her movements gentle. You're giving this house to other women, she asked. I'm passing it forward, I said. Somewhere out there, a woman's being told she's too old, too slow, or too much. Maybe this place reminds her she's none of those things. Amber smiled faintly. I wish I'd learned that sooner. You learned it, I said. That's what matters. She nodded. Where will you go now? I looked out at the horizon where the clouds were beginning to gather again. Anywhere the soil's still good, I said. Clara leaned out from the porch railing. You better not leave before I finish baking the next batch, I called back. If you burn them again, I will leave. Sam snickered. Boss lady's ruthless. Efficient, I corrected. He saluted with his wrench. Same thing. As the afternoon light shifted, a soft rain began to fall, the same kind that had followed me the night I left this house with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Only this time it felt different. Gentler. Cleansing. I looked at the lavender droplets gathering on the petals, bending them but never breaking them. They shimmered like tiny ledgers of grace, balanced perfectly between storm and sun. Clara joined me, umbrella in hand. Full circle, huh? Exactly, I said. Amber stood behind us, whispering, It's beautiful, it's honest, I replied, and that's enough. As the camera of life or memory might pull back, I'd imagine it catching every detail, the plaque gleaming, owned with grace. Clara's laughter echoing off the porch, Amber setting the coffee cups down beside the garden bed. The rain fell harder now, rhythmic soothing, like the world exhaling. And as the lavender swayed gently in the wind, I thought of the first words that started it all. They called me an extra mouth. I smiled watching the water soak into the soil. Turns out, I was the one who fed the story. If you've ever been told you were too old, too slow, or too much, this story's for you. Because sometimes, the quietest victories leave the deepest roots. Comment your city below and tell me what would you have done.